But why do seeds grow? We perceive a meaning to it. Otherwise, what's the point of having a seed that turns into a
Essentially, what
plant?
you're saying is walk like a duck, talks like a duck, must be a duck.
Right. The time is linear because it does things. All I'm saying is that little girl is 40 years old. That's all.
And that makes me older than her. So how do you think that makes me feel?
Hello and welcome to Castle of Horror, the show dedicated to horror movies and awesomeness. This week, we wrap up our series on dinosaurs with the 1993 Steven Spielberg film, Jurassic Park, the first, the one and only. This is our 292nd movie review episode. Bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's movie, which again is our 292nd, we're going to be talking about it from the perspective of horror fans who have seen it. So warning, spoilers ahead. From Denver, Colorado, I'm your host, Jason Henderson, writer of the upcoming as in like 9 days from now, Young Captain Nemo Quest for the Nautilus. With me from Austin is Tony Salvaggio, tech director at Rooster Teeth, lead singer and bassist of the band Deserts of Mars, and lead guitarist of the band Rise from Fire. Say hello, Tony.
Howdy.
Howdy. Also in Austin, writer of the long-running underground comic series Halloween Man, Mr. Drew Edwards. Say hello.
See, nobody cares.
And finally, also in Denver, as always, color commentary from attorney Julia Guzman of Guzman Immigration of Denver. Say hello, Julia.
Hello.
Hello. All right. Jurassic Park is a 1993 American science fiction adventure film directed by Stephen Spielberg. This is a big deal. Produced by Kathleen Kennedy and Gerald Molen. It was the first kicking off the Jurassic Park franchise. It was based on a novel by Michael Crichton, the writer of the Andromeda Strain and the Great Train Robbery. And but this just shot him into the stratosphere. He was one of the screenwriters of it. It was set on the fictional island of Isla Nublar, located off of Costa Rica. And there, John Hammond, a wealthy businessman, has gathered together the greatest scientists in the world to populate an island with I don't know what you would call them, genetically raised, extinct dinosaurs. And unfortunately, industrial sabotage happens. And on the day that he's getting the park reviewed by some experts so that all the insurance companies will sign off, havoc is unleashed with the dinosaurs themselves, and it's basically just a big adventure through this dinosaur-filled land. This was like nothing anybody had ever seen, in a sense, except for that we've been talking about a bunch of movies that are very, very similar to it. So let's get our opening thoughts. And Drew, I'm going to put you right at the end because I want you to try to draw all of this together, like what we've learned, what's the point of all of these dinosaur movies and so forth. So let's go Julia, Tony, and then Drew, and then I'll take us into the plot. So Julia, Jurassic Park. I mean, we've been watching Land of Time Forgot, People of Time Forgot, Dinosaurs versus Cowboys, and all kinds of stuff. Now we're here at Jurassic Park. What are your opening thoughts?
I have seen this movie several times over the years, and I always have thought that it was amazing, that the effects were amazing, that nothing else has ever improved on the effects, as far as I'm concerned. And I was wondering if I would still feel that way watching it again, and I do. I feel the same way. I think it holds up. I think the effects are just incredible. I can't believe that this is 1993 and before a lot of this CG stuff got really good, and it was just the puppets and the machines and all the effects that they put together are incredible, terrifying. The dinosaurs look just every bit to me as real as they did back then. So I just love it. I think it's a really good film. I think it's very scary and suspenseful. There's a few things here and there that stretch the imagination where you're just like, okay, that would never have gone that way exactly. But for the most part, it's really fun. The characters are memorable. The actors are terrific. I just really enjoy seeing this film every time I see it, and I'm really happy to be revisiting it now.
Wonderful. Tony, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, this was right when I was working on my degree. So this was a super important movie. And CG wise, I mean, nothing had been quite like this. There's a Phil Tippett documentary, Phil Tippett, Mad Dreams and Monsters.
Mm.
That I'm trying to find out if it's streaming. I haven't seen anywhere. I saw it at Fantastic Fest, but they go through why this was different. It could have, turned out with not as good CG, but they found armatures so they could control the CG. So it was a very mixed practical CG kind of thing that makes it more grounded than other things that you might see from studios with perhaps less a budget. Definitely, Spielberg took a chance in going that route, and I think it paid off.
So
It
I don't
still
understand.
holds-
Are we, and we can get into it more when we get into the scenes, but you're saying
Sure.
that, are we ever seeing just pure CG, or is it always a mixture of CG plus audio animatronics?
No, there's pure CG, but just the way they did it and the way they animated it was different, and how they integrated people with disciplines in just CG with people who said, I don't want to do that, but I still wanted to do this kind of work. Like, so they go into it more in the documentary. I'm sure there's other documentaries on any Blu-rays or whatever that exist, but the way it was approached was different than now. And even some people who tried to replicate it with, well, we don't have that money, so we're just going to use CG to do the dinosaurs. A lot of those weren't as successsul,
Right.
but also their budgets were different too. I mean, you're talking super high budget for this.
It says
with,
in the
with really good actors as well.
Yeah, it says in the IMDb that there's only 15 minutes of dinosaur footage, which I find astonishing, and that 9 minutes are animatronic and 6 are ILM CGI.
Yeah. But it's how they approached it and how they did it was groundbreaking as well. Nobody had quite taken that approach, and you're at a stage, we talked about this before, where you have an okay mid-budget to low-budget movie, then a few years later you have Raiders of the Lost Ark, which takes that to a new level. In this case, now you've got fairly big name actors and actresses all converging to a Steven Spielberg movie with dinosaurs in it, thus taking it past kind of how dinosaurs were seen as B movies. I mean, you think about it, a lot of people still thought of Kong as a B movie.
Yes.
Or the last time they'd seen Kong was, in the 70s.
Yeah.
So, which, there's a lot of love-hate with that particular movie. So having a big budget, this realistic, taking a pretty well-known novel, adapting that, this sparked a lot of things. And as we found out, like we said last time as well, people's careers, I mean, my career in CG, but then other people's careers in wanting to be paleontologists or anthropologists or maybe even genetic scientists.
Yeah.
Please don't clone dinosaurs.
Yeah. Apparently that is a thing that could happen, not because of the mosquitoes, but because they have found red blood cells inside of dinosaur bones, and so they're like, that could still happen someday.
So they're not really that viable though,
right?
Because they're so old.
The closest
you could do it with a mammoth.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Wanted to.
The closest thing they found viable mammoth cells, which I'm still waiting for some guy who's like the lawyer in this to go,
well, this
mammoth meat, you guys.
This one talks about the paleontologist Maria Schweitzer discovered red blood cells and soft tissue in the fossilized bones of a T-Rex. So that was what they were talking about. But like you say, I mean, there's so many problems with viability and trying to.
Well, I'll save this thought, but this also, I want to try to figure out where this movie sits in the long conversation about irresponsible scientists.
If
let's
I may,
let's go to Drew.
Yeah, thank you.
It's you now.
So the thing is about that versus all the other movies that we've talked about, this is a dinosaur movie and it's in the tradition of the movies that we've been watching. But I always say the thing about this franchise, and it's gotten more and more true as this series has gone on up until like the last 2 movies where they actually have hybrid dinosaurs, is Jurassic Park is really a Frankenstein story. It's about the resurrection of dead things. It's about just because we can do something, should we do something? And
Yeah.
that was what was so heavy about this movie. When I first saw this movie, I was in junior high. We all got in the station wagon. We drove to Wichita Falls, which was the nearest movie theater that was playing it,
Yeah.
and watched it. And my mind was blown because, yeah, like up until that point, it was Guanji and Land That Time Forgot and King Kong. And nothing approached this genre like this movie. Because it has this and this is definitely very true of the novel, but because it has this sort of Frankenstein veneer to it, it does make these stories and this movie, even though it is nominally a science fiction movie and an adventure movie, and it is very thrilling viewed as that, it is more of a horror story than the other movies that we have watched in this series, to be sure. I mean, think of the opening sequence where you don't even really see a dinosaur, but you see these guys trying to, push her back. They keep saying push her back with this
Yeah.
velociraptor, which you never see. And that's Steven Spielberg, going way back in his toolbox, like all the way to movies like Duel and Jaws.
Yes.
It's scary stuff. And this has always been one of my favorite, if not top 10 favorite science fiction movies because of that, because it is all these things, and it is so well put together. It's got an amazing cast too, and you have Samuel L. Jackson, who before he was Samuel L. Jackson, you have it's just great cast playing very memorable characters. And the effects, like what Tony was talking about, you could do like a whole, I'm sure there probably is somebody that's done a whole like great YouTube video series on the T-Rex attack on the car, because in that way they go from showing you a physical mechanical T-Rex to give it weight, and then switching to a CG T-Rex, and the way they like sort of play a magic trick on your mind is sort of fascinating, the way they do that. The other thing that's really interesting about this movie, and I think you'll think of, I'd like to talk about this more, but the way it changed the way we look at dinosaurs, because this is the movie that really popularized dinosaurs and their link to birds. It's the first movie in any of these movies that we've shown that showed dinosaurs with a scientifically accurate posture. It really.
What do you mean by that? What the posture? What are you talking
look at
about?
a lot of old dinosaur movies, they drag their tails kind of like, and they have a posture kind of like a kangaroo. Well, that's not at all.
Right. Okay.
It's not how dinosaurs really most likely walked. This movie did that. At the same time, even though this movie had like a lot of stuff that was like the up to date scientific information on dinosaurs, there's still a lot of stuff that's like blatantly wrong. Like the velociraptors in this movie are not at all what velociraptors were actually like. In fact, velociraptors were quite a bit smaller. The velociraptors in these movies is actually it's another member of the raptor family called Deinonychus. And apparently Michael Crichton just thought velociraptor was a cooler sounding name. But I digress. Sure. The stuff about T-Rex's eyesight that we now know is completely wrong. So that stuff is like, it's interesting to see how that stuff has aged going back and rewatching this. Anyway, I could ramble on and on and on and on, and I'm sure we will go back to this, but this is a fascinating movie, and it's one of my favorites, and I'm glad we finally got around to it.
There's so much there, and so what we'll do is we'll just sort of work our way through and then go into themes as we come across them. But I do want to mention just a note about Michael Crichton, and Michael Crichton is dead. He died young, but this is what launched. So Michael Crichton was always with us. I mean, he had been a huge hit with movies like The Andromeda Strain and like I said, the Great Train Robbery. Yeah, Westworld. So Crichton had a very special, just brilliant mutant power for imagining techno adventure stories that would take a kind of a kernel of a typical adventure, and then he would bolt onto it just all of this crazy town Michener-esque research that he would do. So whatever he would get into, he'd take a typical story like, you know, like the Lost City story, and he would do all kinds of research into whatever he was interested in, like sign language or apes or whatever, and he would turn it into a movie. What was that film anyway? The one with the apes where they go to
Congo.
yeah, Congo, which is a terrible movie, but the book is actually very, very, very readable, and just like Jurassic Park, it's just like dumping research left and right. That was just his power, was taking a story that you'd already seen many times and dressing it up in just lots of research. So he was like a more commercial Michener, if that was even possible. And this one was so instantly recognizable to the world as this is going to be huge. They bought this thing for the movies before it was even out as a novel, and Spielberg got it, and they made it, and Stan Winston, you know, got involved, and ILM and all of this. So this is the movie though that made me aware of Michael Crichton, because I hadn't been a big Michael Crichton fan before Jurassic Park came along. Admittedly, I was in college, but I mean, Crichton wasn't, you know, he wasn't really on my radar. After that, I started reading back all of his stuff, like like the Eaters of the Dead and Congo and you know, Disclosure, which was Michael Crichton researches sexual harassment, and you know, just whatever it was that. So I always really admire all that stuff. Anyway, the deviations from the book, and I haven't read this book, but I know a bit about it just
You've
from
never
research and
read
people telling me.
Jurassic Park?
No, I haven't read Jurassic Park. I feel terrible.
Oh,
If I've
you
read it,
would
I've
love
long
it.
since. I'm sure. If I've read it, I've long since forgotten. But it opens with an attack on a child by a dinosaur, and Spielberg, even though, as you mentioned, he wanted to make an almost horror-like story, that was too gruesome for him. So basically, he's melding horror and straight up adventure films, because they do open with that, but then as soon as that's done, he spends like they open with instead of a baby, dinosaur attacks one of the workers on the island, and we don't see it yet. So he's, you know, using some of those tricks, and then the next like 20 or 25 minutes is pure adventure movie setup, where we meet our main characters, and you know, we meet them in adventurous settings. And I just want to mention here, let's go straight to meeting our two paleontologists out in the desert. But you know, the movie shorthand for this is a cool person who's very important in the world is a helicopter gets sent to communicate with you. That, that's that I love that is shorthand in the movies that will probably always be with us, even in today's and it
Well,
is so valuable that they don't even need it here. It's not picking them up, it's just sending in information. Go ahead, Tony.
but that's, I mean, well, so they moved the kids thing to another movie. Forgot which
Yeah,
Ah,
one
yes.
it was.
that's in the Lost World. A
Yeah.
lot of the stuff a lot of the stuff in the book gets like divvied up between the first three movies. Like the Spinosaurus attack on the boat is a T-Rex attack on a boat. Like they changed out the dinosaur, but and yeah, the compies attacking the little girl is in the beginning of the Lost World, which is still Spielberg. So I guess he got over his
Yeah.
his reservations.
But that's how he does. He'll go darker in a second movie, because think of Temple of Doom being like
That's
Right.
true.
way darker than Raiders. But although
But
that
yeah,
movie,
I mean, the thing with the helicopter though is that's reality. Like when you have enough disposable income because you instantly, or as instantly as possible, need to get to somebody
yes,
and send a helicopter, that's rich people stuff.
sure, no, for
Like,
sure,
I need you here, I'm sending a helicopter.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I know statistically, like in a non-emotional setting, it's just as safe as anything else. But the famous people in helicopters thing wigs me out. Like I don't know. Helicopters, that's one mode of transport. Like send me on
Yeah.
something else. I don't know why. And again, it's that whole emotional bias, right?
No,
Like,
absolutely.
but there's something I've told Rain before. Fuck helicopters. So
Yeah. Yeah, well, yeah, helicopters have accidents just like any other aircraft. I mean, but yeah, but it makes for some amazing film here because
oh, of course.
when they've gathered together their group and I'm going to go back
Oh,
to the introduction of Sam Neill.
also, by the way, it sets up that rich people don't give a crap because sending
Yes.
a helicopter to a dig site is one of the dumbest things you could do.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
they're rushing to stop, keep everything together. But I have to have this now. I have to be there now.
Yeah.
And to the point where they're pretty ticked off. Like, who the hell is this person?
Well, and
You
that
know,
sets up. I mean,
that's
oh
great.
God, Spielberg. I know that Crichton is the writer here, but let's be honest. Spielberg understands, like at a. I'm going to say this, and it means good. At a Pixar level, Steven Spielberg understands all the elements of storytelling.
Right.
So that he's going to set up his themes right now, and he's going to keep hitting them. So when Laura Dern and Sam Neill run into their office because they're like, "Hey, who's the jerkwad with the helicopter who's blowing dust all over the place?" They meet, and we meet for the first time John Hammond, who is who's the guy who's going to be our host as well as the host of these characters, played by Richard Attenborough. And he immediately he calms them down with money. You know, he but the money that John has to throw around also does a bunch of damage to himself, which is that he's like, "Oh, I need your approval for my park. I want you to come with me. I can do that with money. You're angry with me. I can settle that with money." And
Well, that's a
yeah.
kind of he's a lot darker in the novel, but that is kind of who this guy is.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Even at his darkest in the movie, when he's like, "I'm afraid that my grandchildren are going to get chewed up by dinosaurs out there," he is still talking about opening. There's there's like
Yeah,
he
exactly. Yeah, they're having the conversation over the ice cream, and he's like, "Next time, when we
right.
do the next
Well,
next one, we'll do."
the
Yeah.
thing that I
Yeah.
was really taken back about this guy that I somehow had never thought of,
Yeah.
the probably dozens of other times I've watched this movie. But so these, the Dr. Grant and Dr. Sadler go along to him with this island. They appear to be the only people
Hmm.
on this trip that were not told what this park was. So you had two
The
people that he
really
was
solid
perfectly
point.
yeah, he was perfectly willing to put them in a potentially dangerous situation with no idea what they were agreeing to.
Well,
Just
it also seems
just for
absurd that they
yeah.
don't know that this place exists, given, I mean, if they're supposed to be these like renowned paleontologists and all this work has been done, you would think they would have that would have been a very I don't see how you could keep this secret from the paleontologist community. That there's this whole thing being built with these new
Money,
dinosaurs. Or
money
yeah,
talks.
money talks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's all in service. All of that stuff is in service of because it's cool. Because it's cool for him to be surprised. But I just wanted to mention with that helicopter, we uh, we spent some time meeting Sam Neill and Laura Dern. And we can talk about that if you like, but we'll just talk about that as we go along. But we gather them into the helicopter, and we sort of very conveniently and efficiently meet the rest of the crew, which is we've already met David Attenborough. Now we've got Sam Neill, who was with us once before in our Omen series, and Laura Dern.
Richard Attenborough.
Yeah, yeah. What did I say?
David.
David Attenborough. Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Anyway, and now we meet the lawyer Gennaro, and we meet Jeff Goldblum as Ian Malcolm, and they lower down what I can only describe. It's a canyon, but they lower down a column of trees, and it gives you this feeling of moving into another world. And John Williams is kind of working overtime with his music to just raise the hairs on the back of your neck with the feeling that you are moving into something amazing. And that's so effective. I mean,
Well,
like as a writer, I'm watching this and going, how can I do this? How can I
Yeah, all the
accomplish this
sets
in
are
my own writing?
gorgeous.
What's down a
But just
waterfall? Like
yes,
they go down
yes,
an entire waterfall, setting up how characters interact with each other. And we've seen the
Yeah.
lawyer before. He's great because he shows up to a dig site elsewhere in a full suit
That's true.
and not boots or anything, like an
Yeah.
idiot. He's
Yeah.
the
Julia,
guy
you're a lawyer.
that
What's going on with this guy?
no, he's really the guy, like when Pink Floyd have a cigar. He's the guy who would ask which one's pink.
Right.
Like, this guy.
I appreciated that he actually does come around eventually. Like he's because the fact that he's there to go to make sure everything's going to be cool is a good thing. I don't think that's bad. And then but then he does come around once the money, I guess the money talks, like you said. So this is when Jeff Goldblum and Laura Dern actually met doing this film and then ended up getting engaged after.
Really?
They didn't get married, but they were engaged for a couple of years. Yeah.
They're a fun
Because
couple.
Jeff Goldblum was so sexy in this movie. I just kept laughing every time they would show it, like he's like on his side with his shirt open or whatever. I would just start laughing.
That's the one thing.
Corny.
That's the one thing is over and over. I had forgotten he's a real creep in this movie.
Yeah, he is.
And it's just over like, oh, let's try this thing with the water, and that's worked on some women.
Yeah,
like that's part of his. Oh, let me explain chaos theory, baby. And just over and over, I'm like, oh man, I'd forgotten how creepy he is.
I've always loved Jeff Goldblum, so I was delighted by this performance because I thought it was both funny, but also actually kind of worked on me too because I think he's adorable. So part of the thing, I'd be like, okay, I can get past the fact that he's being completely gross and cheesy right now because he really is very funny and cute.
The thing is about that is like he is dressed like exactly
A
like
villain.
Ian. Well, no, he's dressed like Ian Malcolm is in the book. They describe him as being dressed like Johnny Cash.
Okay.
But the Ian Malcolm in the book is much less attractive per se. Like he's described as like a paunchy guy, not necessarily as in shape. And I always, that there's a trope on TV tropes called adaptational attractiveness. And I think that's really in spades here.
Yeah.
Yep.
But what's funny is that they've transformed. I mean, Jeff Goldblum transforms himself. Sometimes he's like super ripped, like Jeff Goldblum in The Fly, and sometimes he's big scrawny Jeff Goldblum, like in Buckaroo Banzai. Here he's like a sort of broad-shouldered, big-chested, open shirt Jeff Goldblum, which is just really, really wild. By the way, the thing with let me grab your hand while I explain the stuff that I study and like draw little pictures on your palm and stuff. I have seen that work. Back in college, I knew a guy who worked this thing really well. You just have to pick the right target, and they'll
tread carefully, Henderson.
I just love it because I know who you're talking about, so I'm just like, yeah, that's a good word for it in this case.
But
that's pretty funny.
But she's a big girl. I mean, she's a scientist. She thinks that Jeff Goldblum's hilarious. She's actually dating Sam Neill's character. They're a funny pair. I mean, all of the considering that that's not really what the movie's about. The movie's doing some good, efficient business setting up the characters, kind of making you understand the difference between them. I have to say, later on, we'll get to some scenes that I just think are a waste of time. But this stuff doesn't.
I want to know why they didn't tell the two paleontologists what they would be seeing, but they told the mathematician, and so he has already got his arguments against this place very thoroughly worked out, and he's right, of course. But
really
because otherwise there wouldn't be a movie if everything worked perfectly. But I mean, there'd still be a movie, but it'd be a more boring one. Again, that show, I don't know why it never bothered me before until watching it this time. It was like, why did they not tell the paleontologists what they would be seeing?
It's really
I think the whole thing is that what's Richard Attenborough's character's name again?
Hammond.
Hammond, yeah. Hammond wants to see their reaction. Like he wants to see what he wants it to be genuine, and he doesn't want it to be like anticipated. So
would it be better to get that for everybody though?
I think it's with them because he knows how much they love.
And in
dinosaurs.
the logic of the book, I mean, the logic of the movie, Gennaro brought Ian Malcolm, so he talked about whatever he wanted, whereas David Attenborough is responsible for delivering Sam Neill and Laura Dern, and so he told them nothing because he's a big drama queen. That's that's just the way. That is
Yeah.
the way that it's working. Now, here's what's funny about Frankenstein stories and how movies are different from TV series. Like if I said to you, "Hey, Drew, let's do a Jurassic Park TV series," the way that you would do that is first we go, well, I mean, it doesn't fall apart. That's for one, because you're going to have it going great and then have much more minor catastrophes appear here and there, like one thing breaks free or there's drama between, this engaged couple of scientists who've come work here. Because, the problem is on TV, basically things go right and little things go wrong. And in the movies, the big thing goes wrong wherever everything else goes right. So the universe itself is making sure that this park doesn't work. And I don't know. I just find it fascinating, basically, that everything goes wrong because we know it has to, because otherwise there's no film. But if it were to be a big series, then you wouldn't have it happen at all.
Although, I mean, I do agree with one of the central things that keeps getting batted around here at times by Jeff Goldblum and at times by Sam Neill's character is that these animals would be pretty hard to contain, no matter how prepared you were. I mean, they're immense, they're powerful, and the way they're presented in this movie, they're very intelligent.
Yeah.
I do think, people have, like, yeah, sure, there's wildlife preserves in the real world, but they're not dealing with anything that's quite like the way the animals are in this movie.
The way the animals are here. And in Deep Blue Sea, Tony, you and I saw Deep Blue Sea like in a preview, like before it even came out. And in that one, they come up with a different excuse for the monsters to be smart, which is that in order to harvest, if I understand correctly, in order to harvest brain cells for use in surgery and for other medical innovations, they need shark cartilage and shark brain matter, but they need more of it because shark brains are small, and so they clone sharks but make their brains bigger, which is the dumbest thing I can ever imagine. It is so dumb that it is hilarious. It is as hilarious as Dennis Nedry in this movie finds the Barbasol can that you can put stolen stuff in. It is just so ridiculous that I love it. But they because these movies have to keep getting more exciting, we have to keep coming up with excuses to make the monsters smarter than your average cheetah.
Well,
and it's not like the frog. It's not like the frog DNA is what's causing them to be super smart here.
Well, dinosaurs. Okay, but here's the thing. This was gobbledygook when this movie came out. The dinosaurs were. Nobody actually thought dinosaurs were that smart when this movie came out. The thing is 20, 30 odd years later, we are actually now coming around to thinking that dinosaurs were pretty smart for animals.
Explain to me your thing about Tyrannosaurus Rex.
Tyrannosaurus Rex.
That's a different movie.
It's going to be that kind of podcast.
Tell us about Tyrannosaurus Rex, why don't you?
Let's cut to the chase. What movie did you see, Jason?
We accidentally watched the porn version.
Did you and Julia watch a different movie?
It was.
So let's go to the
Tyrannosaurus in Jurassic Park. Yes.
Yeah. No. Jason watched Jurassic Park. We know this now.
There was a huge erection.
Yeah, exactly.
No,
we know you guys didn't watch the same movie, so.
What is your question, Jason? For the love of God,
smart T-Rexes. How? Forgive me for being ignorant. I don't understand how we can know anything like that. Like how? Like you were saying at the time, there was this theory that the Tyrannosaurus Rex vision was based on movement. Blah blah. You're saying no, that's nonsense. Okay, so it's nonsense.
There's gene mapping now. They can also use computers to look at the structure of the skull. There's basing things around animals that they are closely related to. It's a lot of different things coming together. I could post you a video on the actual Facebook group if you want to dig deep further. The eyesight thing is what they thought at the time, but now they actually think, first of all, T-Rex had binocular vision very much like a human being, and that he saw facing forward. He most likely actually could see 4 miles ahead of him, if not more. So he could not just, this is in part because of using computer imaging and gene mapping and, looking at the way his eye sockets were. It's also how big his eyeballs would have actually been. It's comparing him to, birds of prey, which we now know T-Rex was related to a degree. And aside from that, even if T-Rex couldn't see you, he could most definitely smell you because his nostrils were huge. And that's true of any predatory animal, which they knew even when this movie came out.
So it's just for convenience sake. This is just
it's to give you a fighting. It's to give you a fighting chance.
Sure.
Because the Tyrannosaurus Rex was, so if anything, things this movie gets wrong. T-Rex was a little bit slower than this movie makes him out to be. T-Rex could probably only run upwards of 26 miles per hour, most likely only comfortably 10 miles per hour, although that wouldn't really matter much because you have to think about how his stride was, because his legs were huge. So he wouldn't really been able to keep up very well with that Jeep the way they have him doing it. But it wouldn't really matter because they probably wouldn't have gotten that far. Tyrannosaurus Rex really could eat a car if it wanted to. It had the strongest bite of any land animal on the fossil record. And it could, again, had a hellacious sense of smell, actually had really good eyesight. The little arms that everybody makes fun of are actually proportionally muscled and could probably rend you to pieces if it picked you up. There's really no way a human being could match a Tyrannosaurus Rex. Tyrannosaurus Rex was, if anything, more badass than the animal in this movie. And the animal in this movie is incredibly badass. So, there's a reason why it's the most iconic of all dinosaurs. It's because Tyrannosaurus Rex was fucking awesome.
I've also heard it could shoot lasers out of its eyes.
I thought it was really funny that they said that the T-Rex robot or animal, the T-Rex, animatronic, was getting screwed up by rain, and so occasionally it would just go off by itself, like when it wasn't supposed to, and it would scare the crap out of all the crew and the cast, because all of a sudden it would just start moving around.
That would be terrifying.
That would be terrifying.
It's like Tammy and the T-Rex.
What was Tammy and the T-Rex?
Tammy and the T-Rex is a terrible 90s movie about a guy who gets his brain implanted. It's on Shudder. It's a guy who gets his brain implanted into an animatronic T-Rex.
That's interesting.
Released the definitive Blu-ray edition of this, by the way, which has the restored to it, which is insane.
If we ever do a second dinosaur retrospective, we should just do that one.
It's it's something else, that's for sure.
Well, what's funny is that's basically the Blue Devil only with a dinosaur, because the whole thing in the Blue Devil was that he got fused with an animatronic devil costume. And that was the initial idea, was that he's stuck in this it's like if the Iron Man suit was fused to Tony, so he could never take it off. That's pretty cool. All right, so as we continue on this long first act, where they are being quite efficient, but there's still a heck of a lot of stuff for them to cover in this film, they go to Jurassic Park and they have the first look at the brachiosaur, which is exciting, and then it becomes Disneyland, which is pretty well. I might be mixing up the order of the tour, but there is a point where they are literally watching a film, like a cute, stupid animated film
with Mr. DNA.
With Mr. DNA, and we mentioned this last week that this movie goes to a lot of this trouble to sort of walk us through these lectures, which they don't bother to do in any of the sequels. I have no idea if it's necessary or not.
Because they're trying to cover stuff that's in the book that takes up a lot of pages, and so they're just like, we got to get this in here somehow, and so they stick it into that little cartoon. Now, what I want to know is Hammond's intention to be at every single time that anybody starts the tour so that he can interact with that
It
movie?
makes no
Because
sense at all. It's
yeah, because
unlikely.
he's got
That
like
is a
this cute
very
little
fair
interaction
question.
thing with himself in the movie.
If I had to guess, that would be the one you would show initially for all of the investors
Yeah,
Right.
and all of the first people.
right.
Yep.
And
So
then he's got
eventually
another version.
that part's gonna be cut and stuff. But
Right, right,
but
right.
it definitely bears out with like if you've seen any trade show films or anything
Mhm.
like that. So he would be there because he's like, hey, you're the
Right.
first 200 people or whatever
The
Sure.
people with
come
the
to Jurassic
big
Park.
money. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
because those are the people he's talking about initially who are going to spend $10,000 to come.
Mm-hmm.
So he damn well better be there for those.
Right.
That's my takeaway. Because it's really stupid to think that he would just spend his whole day in that theater when he owns it. But I think the initial that would be cut and changed. So
Of course,
you would
he
have it
does-
like you'd have it like
maybe
Six
not even
Flags.
cut, but just edited so that whoever is running the tour can be the person. Because
Right.
in
Well,
the
you're
the
forgetting one
version that
thing.
we see, the guy actually says John. So he refers to him as John.
Yes.
But if it just says, if it doesn't say John, then it can be
Right.
anybody.
I hate to go down this rabbit hole, but I have your solution. Assuming that he wants to be as famous as Walt Disney, but maybe more so, they've already established that he's a guy who always dresses like Ernest Hemingway in these like cotton pants and these white guayaberas. So all you got to do is have everybody who does this tour wear the John Hammond outfit,
Act like him. Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
play John Hammond as a
Sure.
character in the
That's
park.
true. That's
That's
true.
And
true.
it's-
Or they
he's
just change that he makes them rich people wise legally
Yeah.
change their name to John.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah,
there's
or
rich
only
reinforces
hire
that.
people called John. Yeah,
Exactly.
like, you
Yes.
only work.
I
He
think
is a
it's more
showboat,
likely
though.
that he's a rich person, so he'll just do that. You're the
Yeah.
person. Your name is Phil, but you are John.
For the
And it's
purposes
like,
of this thing.
I guess so.
Yeah.
He is a showboat, though, so he may, in his mind, think that he's going to somehow be there for every,
Mhm.
just like how he's there for the birth of every dinosaur, and he for sure believes that they're imprinting on him.
Boy, that's
Dude.
a plot point that doesn't go anywhere.
Those
Well, he is the
scientists,
only one who doesn't get attacked by a dinosaur, so maybe he's right.
those scientists have birthed dinosaurs and not told him. Who's gonna tell the boss that he didn't see every dinosaur? Hi.
Right.
No
Well, he
one.
certainly didn't
I
see the ones that were
guarantee
born in the
you.
wild.
Yeah, I guarantee you that those scientists are like, oh no, yes,
Sure,
this
yeah,
is the
yeah,
first one
absolutely.
today.
Yeah.
You
There's a
have been in
couple-
every single one. Seriously.
There's a couple of plot points that get dropped, and I have no idea if they get picked up in the sequel. But one is that thing of imprinting on John Hammond that goes nowhere. Considering that they waste valuable screen time on it, it's weird that it just literally doesn't get picked up again. It doesn't play into the plot at all. That supposedly they're imprinting on him. Second, when Dennis Nedry later drops the Barbasol can, it gets covered over with mud. It has all this DNA in it. Did that get picked up? Did any of the sequels have somebody harvest that Barbasol can versus?
I feel
of
like
DNA?
that is referred to.
Yeah, I think so.
But I
That's-
can't remember.
because I
think-
try to expunge the sequels from my mind. So
That's
Yeah.
that's in I think the second book. I don't think they ever do anything with it.
maybe yeah.
It's been too long since I've read The Lost World. The movies are fresher in my brain. But no, I don't think that ever really goes anywhere. I mean, they may
Well,
have
I mean-
thought of that. It's like sequel farming, but
That's a good. It's a seed. It's a sequel seed that somebody planted and just never got harvested, and that's fine. But to some extent, it's just a plot point being taken care of. It's like, nope, don't worry about it. It got covered in mud. But it's also a plot point that's there now for the sequels to.
I
do
also
what
think
they
it's
wanna
just
do.
like a really nice shot, kind of showing Nedry's hubris after he
Yes.
gets mutilated by the Dilophosaurus.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, golly. We should take a moment to discuss Nedry, the character of Ned, played by Wayne Knight. He it's so fascinating to me what a cartoon he is, like what a melodramatic, and I'm not saying this in a particularly negative way, that he is a like maybe I would do this as well, but he is a melodramatic, just editorial cartoon. He is fat, lazy, sweaty, messy, dishonest, vain,
I
awkward,
will, however,
everything. Yeah.
I will, however, say that he's a stereotype for a reason, because I've worked in the industry long enough to have met some IT people that are very not far off. He's that writ large, right?
Yes.
He's every foible that somebody has, but all in one
All
character.
in one person, all in
But
one character. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
have met the aggregate, multiple people of that.
Yeah.
And it's sad, and it's also crazy because there are certain people who also, I don't say they want to be like him,
Yeah.
but they feel a kinship in a way to being that IT guy, and
Yeah.
that makes me sad sometimes.
Right. The whole thing about
Well-
how I'm smarter than you guys, it's kind of, it's I'm put upon that I have to deal with you people. Go ahead, Drew.
Well, the whole exchange between him and Hammond, where he's talking about having money problems, and Hammond just kind of washes
Right, it's
his
not my
hands
problem.
of it.
Yeah.
I think it's funny watching that with a contemporary lens, because when this came out, I absolutely feel like that the people making this movie wanted you to kind of take Hammond's side and be like, well, your problems are not my problems.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
you're not wrong.
I'm a rich self-made man, and you should pull yourself up by your bootstraps, Nedry. And now I'm kind of like, yeah, man, properly compensate him.
Sure.
Then maybe he won't go rogue and screw up your dinosaur park.
Well, it's a super good point. And
Well,
like I say, it's twisted against him. The world has twisted to make Nedry, an unattractive character to us.
it's also implied by their speech that no amount of money will
Yes.
actually satisfy whatever he's up to, whatever debt that he gets himself into.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it could be just Hammond thinks of that because everyone's kind of lower than Hammond. But in general,
we don't know.
The conversation implies that no amount of compensation will actually, no amount of job, I have to work for the man, and is going to pay for whatever he gets into on the regular. This is juxtaposed by Samuel L. Jackson's character, who's just the programmer who's actually really competent.
Yes.
And can't believe on a day-to-day basis he has to deal with this jackass.
Right.
Because he may be even just as good. He's not as good, we find out, or he's not as sneaky, but he's the competent guy who has to deal with this jerk who makes things hard on other people because, probably doesn't comment his code. Probably, that,
well,
and
he's
let him go
realistic.
because he's a quote unquote genius and he's going to save the company money. And that, I work in the tech field. Fuck that guy.
Yeah.
Like, he makes all of our jobs harder. So, but that, that's how they kind of play that out. Yes, everybody should be compensated. Please, oh God, yes. And that's part of what I had. It's one of the many things I have had to deal with in when somebody leaves who isn't compensated correctly, and you go, I can't blame you. This is going to make my job really hard. But I don't know.
Samuel Jackson's character, when you think about it, you said we don't know. He might be just as good as Wayne Knight's character. He might not be as good, but he's very realistic. And when he's looking at the millions of lines, it doesn't matter if he's a genius. If there's no way to get these answers without reviewing at all, he can look at it and go, there's no way I can do this in 2 hours. There's no way I can do this in 40 hours. So, you're going to need to get your guy back if you're going to want these answers. And later they come up with, there's a lot of like technical gobbledygook, but if what Nedry's done is corrupt everything. If you and I had come across this and we go, our build is corrupted, sometimes your only choice is to fall back to a prior build. They don't discuss anything like that. They just say, reboot it and it'll take care of it. whatever, because it
Yeah.
doesn't matter. This is just gobbledygook that they're
Well, I
saying.
will say that I get frustrated when things aren't that realistic because consulting someone would be fairly cheap, in my opinion.
Right.
Like an actual computer person,
That's a
actual
good
tech
point.
person. But I would say, even for the time, that while there are some really annoying parts, that a lot of it still mostly holds up. You know, some of the gooey stuff, a lot of my stuff would be more nitpicky,
Sure.
considering I've seen really dumb movies that are like
The weird,
but I think that they did a good
GUI
job overall.
when she's going through the file system and it has a 3D GUI
Yeah,
for
you would never do
navigating
that.
a file manager. That was a really strange thing to come up
Well,
with.
it's so people can visualize it. I mean, I've made my peace with that because it's really dumb and it's never how things work.
Right.
Like, you don't waste CPU power on that, and you certainly don't if you're hacking or whatever.
Sure.
Especially in Unix, which I have forgotten most of, but I had to use it when I was in school
Right.
on our file server. Like, none of that's a thing. But when you sometimes have to do that work, even in my tech jobs, where you have to give somebody an interface for
Yes.
some things because it's laborious to type it all in, and you just want you need people to be working if they're not as technically minded.
Right.
I certainly
Right.
prefer a lot of GUI stuff, but that level of it is pretty crazy. But I don't, they have to show it, and it gets everyone in. We all know, tech people probably sneer at it, but it's, they're more likely to sneer at the girl going, "Oh, this is Unix. I know this."
Right.
Which is famous across tech. Like, "Oh, what's this? Oh, it's this. I know this." Like, everybody laughs and has a funny
Sure.
tech joke. But other than that, like, it is a way. Yes, you would never have that, but it's, I don't know. Not to belabor it, but that's the long and short of all of that.
The only movie I can think of where it actually got where you had a lot of like just going through directories and showing long lines of directories and
Because that's
so
boring
forth.
as hell.
Well, yeah, but Sneakers actually had that with Dan Aykroyd
Right.
going, "Oh, look, here's a line that's interesting," or blah blah blah, and it's
Sure.
it's just displaying exactly what you would expect, which is a whole bunch of alphanumeric characters on a line. Whatever. It doesn't even matter. It's a dumb thing to focus on, considering they're showing us dinosaurs.
Right.
That's
No, I got you.
the main purpose of this movie. That's the other
Right.
thing. There's this concept in the books called the Save the Cat, where they say that your movie is more likely to satisfy people if you have a big section that is the promise of the premise. That's if you look at the poster and it promises a thing like we're going to have dinosaurs, and you go in and you got a lot of that, then people will come out satisfied. They're like, well, I saw the poster, it said there was going to be this, there was that, and so now I don't feel like I got ripped off. And you get people upset to the point that they tell their friends and nobody goes and watches something. If you see the poster and it says this is a romantic comedy, and you watch the movie and it's got dinosaurs, or it's actually a divorce drama where somebody dies.
Unless you went into it and then you saw Tammy and the T-Rex. And
Right.
then it is romantic comedy that has dinosaurs.
Or Jurassic Park. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Was that romance? I don't know. I haven't seen
by the way, that music, that you tipped us off to that. Yes. Geez, that soundtrack. I mean, it's not as like iconic as Star Wars, right? Everybody is born into the world now knowing Star Wars.
Yeah,
But
saying something is not as iconic as Star Wars is
right.
Yeah.
That's a big
given.
right. That's
There's
a
only
lot to
very few
ask.
things that are. Yeah.
But it's close. I mean, this thing was just, it just became extraordinarily well known. And I remember hearing it at the Oscars. I don't remember if it won, or but I just remember hearing it everywhere. So yeah, and it does it makes you excited all the way through. You get those hairs on the back of your neck at different points. It's it's doing its job. Steven Spielberg knows who he can trust, and that's another one where he's going all the way back.
Well,
to
yeah,
Jaws.
John Williams. Jeez, like, yeah,
Yeah,
Jaws might be as iconic as Star Wars.
it's a really good
Like
point.
but that might be one of the few things. But it's funny, like thinking about how many really, really iconic film scores
Yeah,
uh this man is responsible for. I
he did win a few awards. I'm looking. He won. He was nominated for a Grammy. John Williams was. He won the BMI award and the Saturn Award, which isn't a surprise. He was not nominated for an Academy Award for this, which I'm kind of shocked by, honestly, because it. I challenge anybody to go, well, do you remember what won the Oscar for Best Score in 1993? I mean, because I don't know what it is. Maybe it's amazing, but I doubt that it's as memorable as John Williams' score for Jurassic Park. But so it goes. All right. So yeah, they had that tour that we're talking about, and then after that, they go into an electronic Jeep tour where they're going to go look at dinosaurs. And this is yet another moment when the movie is kind of making a funny observation about real life, which is that you're on a zoo tour and you often don't see the animals that you're supposed to see. What is dumb to the point of absurdity is that what they have are basically Jeeps in neutral that are just being hauled along a track, but they're just Jeeps. They don't have locks, so the scientists just kind of crawl out and start walking around to see what they can see. And in this period, you know, they get to do some scientist stuff. They talk about chaos. They meet one of the local biologists who's messing around with the sick Triceratops. Can somebody explain something to me? They find the Triceratops. Triceratops is sick. We could see Laura Dern be a scientist and like scoop through the dung and stuff. What are we supposed to be learning here? Like, what's the plot lesson the movie's
Well, okay,
teaching us?
so I will give you my thoughts based on the
Yeah,
film and
please.
also based on what I read on the comments. So okay, what we're supposed to be learning is the idea that they've created these dinosaurs and then they've put them into a habitat that is not there. It's not what they would have had. It's not what
Mhm.
they should have. So here she's like, why is it sick? Maybe it's because it's eating food that it's not supposed to be eating, these berries, etc. Apparently in the book, and I don't remember this because I read the book like in college, but I don't really remember very much about it at all. But the apparently in the book they describe more in depth about what actually happens with it, and that
Okay.
is that this particular dinosaur would eat stones along with food to create like gizzard stones so that it could help to digest the food, and then it would
Mm.
regurgitate the rocks. And in this case it was also eating those berries and then regurgitating the berries, but the berries were making it sick. But she doesn't find the berries in its dung because it's regurgitated them along with the rocks elsewhere. So that's what apparently I guess the book explanation was for this. But
Yeah,
yeah,
I
but the
mean,
idea is all that the dinosaurs are out of their habitats, and these people didn't pay attention to what they should and shouldn't be eating and what or they would have eaten or not.
and
Huh.
that's part of her confusion because she finds one, since they don't go to the regurgitation part, she finds one on
Right.
its tongue
Yeah.
Yes.
at the beginning. So she's like, that's weird.
Oh
I'm
yeah.
pretty sure it's eating the thing and then doesn't find it. But
Right.
we don't, I mean, that's probably a scene that got cut or whatever.
Mhm.
So this
Because
was just to
they
teach
were
us
leading to the point. Yeah, because
That it's
she's appalled
unethical. Yeah.
that
that,
it's unethical.
yeah.
This is what she was talking about at lunch, where she
Mhm.
goes, these plants could be dangerous.
Right.
And so then they show it. That's an interesting dot to connect because it seems like you don't have to teach that lesson twice. You can either have her give the lecture
Well,
or you could have the scene.
I think no, I think you have to show it because you have to show the effects that it has on the living thing. You have the
Mm,
whole statement when they're debating all this over lunch where Hammond talks about, oh, no one would object to what I'm doing if it was condors on
yeah.
the island, but condors are something that still exists.
Oh, that's
All
brilliant
these
too, isn't it?
yeah, all these animals are from a time period millions of years ago, and the world that they existed in isn't, the climate's different, the life is different, it's just not the same. So I do think you have to show that. I
Also,
think
Mm,
yeah, so Yeah, also there's a difference between, hey, why do you have poisonous plants around me? Don't serve those in my salad or let children play on them is different than why are you letting the creatures go places where you don't have anything like what they had.
Mm.
It's not exactly a regurgitation of the same premise because you could
Yeah.
go, by the way, I don't know why you have poison ivy growing. You should have another ivy. Like, and then I don't think you should let the creatures go eat this other thing. So they're not really the same, in my opinion.
No, you're right.
Um,
I get it. You're exactly right. I do kind of feel like you maybe could have had the lecture come now, but whatever. I'm actually not disagreeing with it. I'm just saying if you were looking to cut for time, you could have like combined these two scenes. But whatever. I mean, these guys are good at what they do. I just found it interesting that that's the one where they connect the dots out of all the stuff that
plus,
that they leave. Yeah.
plus, it's way cooler to see this creature than it is
Yes.
for somebody to gripe about poisonous leaves.
Oh no, for sure.
Truth.
Totally, totally. So
that's an
interestingly
amazing
enough,
scene.
what happens here now is we now begin basically the movie in earnest. This is the point when the ride breaks down and the scientists basically split up now, and they've given us a lot of like this movie's full of stingers, by the way. Like, oh, my sister is a hacker. By the way, there's a big storm coming in. Blah blah blah. It's full of all these little dialogue bits that are intended to set up later scenes coming, and they come with regularity, and it's all
Well,
based on this.
even
Yeah,
it's not even just dialogue. Like even like showing you know, I talk about how clever this movie is. They show you a goat as a way of saying, "Oh, the T-Rex won't come out because we're coaxing it with a goat." And
right.
then in one of the scenes that I'm sure we're about to talk about, we come back to that same goat.
Yes, and it's gone. And that's actually right about now because this is the point where everything's going wrong. The Dennis is about to do his craziness. The scientists have split up. So some are going to get back in the Jeep, and Laura Dern. Everybody's going to get back in the Jeep basically, and Laura Dern's going to stay with the veterinarian who's dealing with the Triceratops. And that's how Laura Dern winds up back at the command center while everybody else has their Jeep adventure. And the first big thing that happens with the Jeep adventure, I think, is what everybody remembers when they close their eyes and think of Jurassic Park, is probably
Objects in the mirror are closer than they appear.
Yes, all of this stuff.
Yes.
Now, I'm going to say something sacrilegious, but I think the stuff with the business, the Steven Spielberg business with the Jeep and the tree and the yada yada, I think is a colossal waste of time. It doesn't need to be here. It gives us nothing. It's like even watching it back in 1993 in the movie theater, I was like, oh, this is a waste of time. This is just slapstick with a Jeep. I don't know why we're wasting all this time when the movie's already well over feature length. And
because it's exciting. It's one of the most exciting things that happens in the film.
I mean, meaning no disrespect, but it's an exciting movie overall, right? There's already Tyrannosaurus Rexes who are closer than they maybe appear, and weird spitters eating Newman, and all this stuff going on. And I don't understand why we're also doing just goofy antics with a Jeep. That just it truly should have been left.
It doesn't get to be fair though. I think what you're remembering is the end of the sequence is goofy. The sequence itself is pretty harrowing because he's trying to get a child out of a car that's crashing and they're trying to dodge it.
It also shows character growth because like throughout this movie, this is a guy that hates kids. We're introduced to him purposely frightening a kid to him at this point, risking his life to save a kid. So Jason, that absolutely had to be there. How dare you say that you know better than Steven Spielberg?
Well, but I'm with Tony that I the stuff about let me drag you out of the car and it's spinning around or it's going to fall over on our heads totally. But then with them chasing it in the tree and all that stuff, it just feels
no. I
silly.
think what I think. Far be it from me. I mean, we all know you watch Jurassic Park, so we may not even be talking the same movie. But I think what you remember is the stinger, which is the car crashes and we're back in the car. Ha ha ha.
Yeah,
that's the slapstick part.
Yeah.
The actual him being trapped in the car and it's coming down and them dodging it, that's a great action scene. So it's not played. None of that is played for slapstick at all.
When they're crawling, so you don't feel that way about when they're like crawling down the tree
and
it's coming after
no
Because each thing, like if you set that up, and they aped it again, which is the best part of the sequels, in my opinion, with the glass breaking scene on the bus. In I forgot which one it is, but
That was
that scene I
Jurassic
like.
Park
That's
2, I
That's Lost World.
think.
Yeah.
I think
Or was
that
You're
it
talking
3?
about the T-Rex. You're talking about the T-Rex attack on the like kind of RV type things, like where they're
Well,
being
and
pushed off.
I just remember she
no.
was on the glass in that movie.
Yeah,
In
that's
the
Lost
sequel, yeah, she's like the glass is breaking and the bus is gonna fall. I think
Yeah.
that scene's great. But anyway, they it's kind of a similar one. I realized how similar they were when I watched this again. But I no, the climbing down the tree where something's gonna crush you,
Yeah.
and he has to save the kid and try to get him out at risk of his own life. I think each of those things, like, because you think like, oh, we're all the woods, no pun intended, and then it crashes down again and again.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
knowing
No, I
you
mean,
and having been friends all this time, I think your predilection is to just remember the ha 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 moment, which is
yeah.
meant to diffuse the action scene, right? When you make that kind of thing to go where people go, oh, now I can relax.
Now I can
The
relax.
T-Rex isn't going to jump down on top of the car now. We're in safety land.
Oh,
And
that's interesting.
That's how you shorthand that, right? It's
I
the same way you do it in horror.
I like your theory. Yeah.
Like
No,
in
that makes
horror,
sense.
you do that is like, okay, we're going to give you a breather before we ratchet the horror back up.
Yeah.
So
No, I
this
get
is
it.
one of those sequences, and it's not played for slapstick at all. The crashing part isn't like, it's not. This isn't Evil Dead 2.
Yeah. No.
It's never
For
played
real.
for that.
You're totally right. The movie, this is the only time in the whole movie that I feel like it veers too far into comedy. But I hear what you're saying, and I totally
I think you need to rewatch the scene because Tony's like 100% right, my friend.
All right. Okay. I've no
Take
doubt that that's the case.
Your feelings.
Hey, I'm siding with you.
I know. It's just funny. We're both just telling Jason like he goes, "This is sacrilegious," and we're like, "Hell yeah, it is." Suck it.
But again, maybe you're right. He did. Maybe it is because he watched the porno version.
Yeah, I mean, they were naked, falling down a tree, and you should have seen what they were doing. I didn't find any of that harrowing. Titillating, maybe. Harrowing, no.
No. So we have the car stuff, and then gosh. So
I mean, are we not going to talk about the T-Rex versus the Jeep?
oh well, no, but feel free. Yeah.
Which sets up like any movie with a giant creature from here. This starts. There's gonna be a glass of water or a puddle.
It's a super good
We've
point.
just this is the meme version of this movie.
Think about that for a second. Is that true? I mean, definitely it gets used as a joke. Does anybody use it unironically in the future? Maybe they do. I just can't remember it.
Well, I'm just saying it's the joke or the shorthand, like every the water thing. That sets the precedent. If you need to make a Scream-esque, I mean all the parody, any of those parody movie things of giant monsters or dinosaurs, it's gonna be water rippling, a thud and water rippling from here on out. Which, man, we can all hope we make something that gets in the collective conscience.
Oh no, you're right. And the way the sound was used, just that sort of the water. You're right. The water ripple. It's almost as though this is the movie that discovered such an idea, which is wild. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's possible we could go back and find some war movie that had done it, or something that we're just not thinking of, but maybe Spielberg was familiar with. But yeah, you're right.
Well,
it absolutely did it. Yeah.
If you tried to say that, it would just get the see, no one cares. You go, well, actually, Over the Brink in 1957, and you would just cut to him going, no one cares, see?
Right.
Over the Brink, no one cares. Whatever, whatever had that before, this is now the de facto version of that.
Absolutely it is. Yes. So yes, Drew, go crazy. Tell us about this important thing.
This whole sequence where you have like the Jeep stall in front of the T-Rex cage, effectively, or environment, or whatever you want to call it, really kind of sells why this whole thing would not work. Because first of all, you have Jeeps that cannot get away from a predator that's the size of a bus that is now able to get out. And Tony, you may have to back me up at this, but I was talking about this a little bit when we were doing opening thoughts. The way this scene is constructed, where like one moment you will have like a physical hand of the T-Rex as like the wiring of the what's keeping this animal in place snap, and then the next moment you show the full body of the T-Rex, and that's CG. Then it'll cut back to like the humans in the Jeep reacting to like the head of the animatronic T-Rex as it's like kneeling down next to the car. Like the way this is all constructed to like sort of fool your mind by showing you different forms of special effects from one point or another. Like that to
I
me
didn't realize they were
why...
switching back and forth. I
Yeah.
honestly didn't. And in fact, to be honest with you, it seems so real to me. This is a stupid thing to say, but it seems so real to me that I just completely forget that I'm not even looking at a real thing. It feels like a dinosaur is chasing, our
And I
characters.
I think it's the fact that they took the time to, trick your brain like that is exactly why you get the feeling that you're talking about, because it doesn't give you long enough to get an uncanny valley thing going on, the way, some other things that would just rely on CG or all animatronic. And I think that's the reason why this movie holds up and the effects in this movie still look good this many decades later, where some movies that are more recent do not.
I agree, and that's the magic. That's where everyone involved was smart enough to only show what you needed to know and cut around the limitations. I think a lot of stuff that doesn't hold up is because people, again, to paraphrase, you don't know that you didn't think about maybe you shouldn't. You're so
Right,
enamored with,
exactly.
hey, we're creating CG and how cool is CG that you don't go back to tricks that, we don't have this budget, just cut around it.
Yeah.
And, so many people get involved in that. And it's so weird to me how many times I've seen something where like, you could have just cut a different shot. You wouldn't have had to spend that money. And here you have money, but they still are economical about it in knowing what they have and how to cut away, and that comes from somebody with experience.
Well, and
I mean,
also
somebody
what's
who's
going to be
worked with an
most effective.
animatronic shark, right?
Yes,
Like,
right.
I think you learn things when you work with an unpredictable animatronic shark that maybe when you go to make dinosaurs, you're smart about it. What
But
I
there's
would love to
also-
see,
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
talking about, cutting this as horror, which is something else I think you were hinting at, Drew, or talking about.
Yeah.
I would love to see this now that you kind of, it's in my brain, see this version in like reproduced. And now I'm going to play my hand, so I don't know if I can do this without people, I have to hope that the mass audience doesn't listen to this, but to cut it as like a Giallo style gloved hand murderer who's, cutting barbed wire fence and then sneaking up, like, I mean, obviously not overturning a Jeep or whatever, but to have those same beats be an homage to this would be fascinating. It would be a fascinating exercise.
The way they do that though, in thinking of this as a horror sequence, it's really the only way to do that, because for one, you have to show off the sheer power of this animal, which, as I was talking about earlier, was immense. Like this is like a walking tank is what Tyrannosaurus Rex was. So it makes the bravery of like the two human characters in this, Jeff Goldblum and Sam Neill, that much more amazing and heroic. And also, when you see, also seems kind of futile in a way, because you literally see this animal devour a car, and the way they even do the motion of him
like it's mad at the car. That's the hilarious thing.
It's like it's attacking it the way a predatory animal will attack something that it's killed. Like he chews on the tire, kind of picks at it like it's flesh, and he is probably mad at it because it doesn't taste good,
right?
Or she. I should be saying she, because this is
you're right. We keep calling it
female.
Yeah, they're all females, right?
Female T-Rex.
That's definitely definitely some built-in misogyny there or sexism, not misogyny, but pure sexism, that because of the power of this animal, we always refer to it as a he, and we're not the only ones. I mean, I think people forget that they're all female.
Well,
It's interesting.
it's and this T-Rex is still around because it's the T-Rex that's still in the franchise several movies later.
That's true.
But
Yeah.
and this give it up to the sound effects people too, like not just the stuff with the car, but like that T-Rex sound effect, even though it's probably not what the actual animal would have sounded like, is now what you imagine what a T-Rex would sound like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
I mean, yeah, that's the definition now. That's
It's
the
the-
Godzilla sound of movies. Like, this is how a T-Rex
Which is a
everybody.
combination of a whole bunch of animals. It's not.
Is
It's
that
not
so?
just like one thing. Yeah, it's like alligator and dog and like all these crazy animals. The whole
I've
big
always
combination of
heard.
animals.
I don't know if this is true or not, but I've always heard that it had their growl from the creature from the Black Lagoon thrown in there, and I hope that's true.
Well, all it says
mean-
on the, I mean, I was just looking at the IMDb, and it just says that it is. Let me see here: dog, penguin, tiger, alligator, and elephant.
See, an alligator is actually right. Like to what they now believe, they do think T-Rex would sound more like an alligator, so it would hiss and growl, but it wouldn't necessarily roar. But it looks like it should roar. So kudos to them for coming up with it.
All right, let me ask an ignorant dinosaur question, because this is so fun to find out about. I've heard that the colors for the dinosaurs might be totally different. That scientists have new ideas about what color dinosaurs would be. Is that true?
The thing is about that, they have thoughts that dinosaurs were probably much more vibrant than they're usually, instead of like the sort of elephant skin that we see in most of these movies. And there is now, they do have found like preserved skin pigmentation, skin, in fossils and stuff like that. But the thing is about that, there's no real way of there's lots of ways to do theory about that, especially like looking at animals that they're closely related to. But there's no real way of knowing for sure. Ultimately, there is no way of ever knowing for sure, unless we somehow find a live dinosaur, because like we can come up with pretty close ideas. And it's like the whole thing about feathers or no feathers. Very probably some dinosaurs did have feathers and some of them might not have, but there's no way of ever knowing for sure, because we don't have a real dinosaur to come look at.
Or even a fossilized, like we have woolly mammoths, which are much younger, and you have the whole darn thing, and it's
they have found fossilized feathers on some dinosaurs, but that's even then like it's only partial parts of their body, so we don't even know how much of them were feathered.
But you're right.
The Velociraptor probably was completely covered in feathers.
Interesting. Like a turkey.
Yeah. Well, okay. So here's something that'll blow your mind. When I was talking to the paleontologist that Tony and I were talking about this last episode,
the other porn movie reference.
Yeah,
right.
This is something that I've since dug into. So dinosaurs are reptiles, right? And birds descended from dinosaurs. Ergo, there is something that is heavily being argued right now, that birds should just be considered another member of the reptile family.
Oh, interesting.
And when you really look at birds, they do just kind of look like fuzzy lizards anyway. So I can get behind that.
Sure.
Even though I think it would make a lot of people a lot more hesitant to eat chicken. But the thing that was even said to me when we were discussing this is like, anytime someone eats turtle or snake or alligator, what do they all say?
Tastes like chicken.
Well, there's reason for that.
I wouldn't be at all surprised. I mean, and that is super interesting. Yeah.
So from here on out, what we should say is, when instead of taste like chicken, we should also just say chicken tastes like dinosaur.
Chicken tastes like
and we
dinosaur.
can all be like, and that's why there's dinosaur nuggets.
Oh
The kids have it right.
my god.
The kids' processed meat nuggets taste like dinosaur, and they're shaped like dinosaurs, and all the other stuff tastes like dinosaur.
You know it.
Ta-da! There you go.
It is inexorable logic. That's true. The
Never mentioned in this movie. I mean, I don't know why, but
but you know that they would be selling it in that big
dinosaur
cafe that
meat,
they're in. No, but
brontosaurus
dinosaur nuggets.
burgers. Like, I could.
God,
How long is
yes.
it? Do you think before they're like, okay, so I can get you dinosaur meat?
Oh, they would listen. They would start breeding dinosaurs just for meat. They would, guaranteed. So they could sell a $200, Brachiosaurus burger.
Somebody's
Absolutely.
selling a straight up Flintstones like Bronto burger.
Yes,
Or
sure.
like the ribs that turn
Smoked
over the car.
brontosaurus. Yeah.
Somebody in the future of Jurassic Park is selling that. There's no way.
I
There's
find
no
it
way.
fascinating how this movie, which is an enormous, and it's not the first time that we've come across this kind of double lesson, right? This movie, which is a huge product with toys and records and T-shirts and whatever, is about people who are making a huge product and are cutting corners and risking people's lives. And I just find it fascinating when a giant commercial artifact is mocking the idea of giant commercial artifact. I mean, I get that it's an extreme in the movie where they're messing with people's lives because.
Well, what's the line in the movie? If Pirates of the Caribbean breaks down, the pirates don't start eating the turtles.
I
Yes.
love that line. That's such a
That's
great line.
actually where they're most like Crichton. Crichton actually spends his life in his own memoirs and in the novels trying to explain the differences between things like that. Hey, condors. You can try to save condors, but you shouldn't bring back dinosaurs because there's reasons for this stuff, or that or John Hammond saying, I worked on this because this is I wanted to do something big and make money. I mean, Crichton is an enormous capitalist himself, right? So he's never going to think that it's a bad idea. But I do think the message gets a little muddled. All right, go ahead.
So they say that the whole, the Pirates of the Caribbean, when it breaks down, doesn't eat anybody, unless that theme park is made by Rob Zombie. Then I think none of all the boring parks that doesn't happen. But let me tell you, the exciting adventure parks, when those rides break down, total
Forgive my
chaos.
stupid. Didn't he didn't he do a movie like that I haven't seen? Like, is 13 about that?
Maybe. But either way. Yeah, you can say that about boring parks, but all the good ones, all the ones with slightly disreputable people, right? Like working the rides, or possibly disreputable people working the rides. There's the danger that could happen when it breaks down.
I think the question, though, like that's what kind of makes this a Frankenstein story, because there's the ongoing argument of we should not resurrect what is been, it's gone to dust. It's no more. It's dead, and some things belong dead, and so. Well,
it's an excellent
like
bride call out, by the way. I really
yeah, you're very welcome. It's this park is cursed from the beginning, and you see this again. You see this continued on. And your mileage may vary with the sequels. I like all of these movies. I'm not gonna lie. Like there's something about them I find immensely entertaining, even the ones that are bad. But like, you do see this question recurring over and over and over and over again of, is it okay to play God? And none of the other movies do it quite as elegant as this movie. But where was I going with that? I just think that there's something distilled about that, and that's what keeps this from being Land That Time Forgot, where it's like, oh, isn't this thrilling? There's dinosaurs, like it puts this whole other weightiness.
Yeah, you're
to
right.
It.
And remember, that's also that's the techno thing that Crichton would try to do, is he would give you something that you would have seen in the 50s or the 60s, except for that he's going to throw in a postmodern techno thriller twist. So yes, it's going to be an island with dinosaurs on it, but it's because scientists made them, or whatever, or it's a It's a murder mystery, a sexy murder mystery, but it's really about how the Japanese are buying up corporations.
Or
You know,
or it's a sexy dinosaur movie as Jason watched it.
I think that mention earlier of Hypatia Lee, maybe the first time somebody's mentioned Hypatia Lee, certainly on this show, but like I haven't heard that name in 20 years, so maybe 30. And I'm sorry,
But
Hypatia, if you're listening.
it also
So,
calls the thing. Jurassic Park serves it all of those concepts very well in both the book and the lines that we mentioned. Because part of what I do is risk mitigation.
mhm.
So when I hear things like, "Well, this can't possibly do that because it wasn't written this way," well, yeah, but if you're also adding AI learning to it, then it doesn't work the same way.
Yeah,
They shut down, which they say shut down. They probably moved it to a government facility where encrypted code between computers started talking to each other, but then they had encrypted it so that only they could talk, and the programmers didn't know what they were saying.
uh-oh.
Like, we don't. This sounds like some Skynet shit. So they cut that down. But
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure they didn't just shut it down. I'm pretty sure it now lives in some facility.
Absolutely. And some guy in a less regulated market somewhere probably has it working in an air-gapped facility where he's
Sure.
yeah.
Like the Hadron Collider, where they're like 99.99 whatever percent, we probably won't open up a black hole and destroy everything instantly. See,
Yeah.
for those kinds of things, for like, hey, we're pretty sure this vacuum cleaner will do what we want, or this, even God forbid, security robot, which, could go wrong, that you can accept a little risk. Universe destruction, I like 100% chance.
Right.
But
No,
this is
it's a
science,
super
there
good
never
point.
is. So all of these things, like the world is built on this premise of, well, it probably won't do that, or it shouldn't, which that's a very
Interesting.
dangerous word.
Yeah, the idea
So-
that these guys in Lucerne, Switzerland could one afternoon just destroy the universe, nobody would ever know. I mean, obviously.
And I'm pretty sure along the way, if they had released scientific journals, if they weren't so secretive, right, which is part of what they have to do for something like a Jurassic Park, some scientist somewhere, either in there and he got kicked out or silenced, he or she, they got silenced, or someone viewing the scientific journals would have gone, hey, so frogs.
Yeah.
Let me tell you about frogs. Has no one thought about maybe the sex change part is a bad thing to add?
That's
Of
really
course,
funny,
because
isn't it?
somewhere along the way,
Here's
yeah.
the thing about that. Reptiles can do that anyway. Like a Komodo dragon,
Well-
a female Komodo dragon in captivity just gave birth to eggs without a mate.
Right.
So, like they didn't even need the frog DNA thing.
Right.
Yeah.
But along the way, there's either somebody who would have found it or did find it, and somebody went, well, dinosaurs, we're going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
You know?
That is really funny that nobody you have to accept the truth in this movie that that basically it didn't occur to anybody, but it is awfully strange that that one of these scientists who works with frogs all the time didn't think of
Well,
Why
that at all.
frog DNA? The frog DNA thing's always bugged me on other levels. Like, why not something more closely related to dinosaurs? Like, why not a crocodile or like a bird of some kind? Like things that are actually
Well, obviously
related
it's
to
because
dinosaurs.
they want the spontaneous sex change, and you're right, they could have found their way to it through other means. They could have just had an ovarian splicing just happen spontaneously instead, and just gone with crocodile DNA. I don't know,
Although that does kind of play into the whole Frankenstein thing again, because like they're taking something that exists and splicing in something.
well, it also
something
means
else.
these are not real dinosaurs. That's the crazy thing. It's like you said, these are Frankenstein robots of dinosaurs. It's Westworld again. I mean, it's really literally Westworld again.
And
except for
yet
instead of yeah,
and
go
yet
ahead.
these are the most scientifically accurate dinosaurs that you could have done at this
Right.
time.
Sure. No, for sure. Yes. There was something else I was thinking about this whole period. So we're at the point of, you know, the attack on the Jeep. That is when Ian Malcolm very, very bravely tries to draw the dinosaur away, and so does Sam Neill. They're both very brave. Sam Neill has his adventure where he goes off with the kids, and there's a breather. This is the midpoint where everybody just basically takes a breather for the night. Sam Neill and the kids are too far away. They sleep in a tree. They watch some brachiosauruses, and the whole family dynamic is happening. John Hammond is having ice cream and talking about how he just kind of just got it slightly wrong. So next time he's going to get it slightly better, which is what
I
we're
know I put
supposed to
my
learn about him.
grandkids in mortal freaking danger, but well, can't let this ice cream melt.
Right. Well, yeah. It's a dicey
What a jackass.
scene to write. It's a tough scene to write because they have to like have that dialogue and just talk and plot exposition and mood breather, like you were saying, all that stuff, and also not seem crazy, that they would be able to talk and not be just out of their heads with tension.
Right. I mean,
yeah.
I guess you deal with trauma, however, but it just again solidifies, and it's great because it solidifies his character.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It teaches us that he's not going to learn his lesson. You know, that or no matter what. Once he wants the grandkids back, but he's definitely not giving up. He does say it at the end, by the way, where he goes, "Oh, I'm against this part too," but I don't believe it. I really believe that he's going to
Doesn't last.
Yeah, he likes making, like most dudes like that, he likes making money.
Yep.
He'll quickly forget it.
Yeah, I don't even think so much that it's about the money. I think that he's such a megalomaniac.
Yeah.
He wants to create something like this.
Right.
You know?
I mean, it's something that's never been done before. He's creating life. He's bringing back extinct animals, and all he needs to do is just figure out how to fix the problems that went wrong. You know, then it'll be fine.
Plus, he's daddy. Urzat's daddy to all these
dinosaurs.
eggs.
Yeah,
they imprint on me. Wait till they get to be teenagers, Mr. Hammond. You're not my real dad. all those dinosaurs are gonna have all kinds of angsty problems, and you're gonna be sad that you're their supposed dad.
So much that we could have done with that, man. With him walking out there like Chris Pratt, and having the dinosaurs not eat John Hammond. That would be interesting.
Like
and
I said,
to my knowledge,
they get to be teens,
right?
And they know
whatever that is for
I'm
a
gonna
dinosaur.
eat you just for spite. I hate you.
I hate you.
Won't let me go to Dino Prom.
I love the idea of Dino Prom. That's a great idea.
Get right on that. Let's
Tammy and the T-Rex too. Dino Prom.
It would just simply be Pretty in Pink, but with dinosaurs. So that like she'd be like, "What about Dino Prom? Say it." Okay. So anyway,
we have to get to, obviously, you know, we want to get to the Velociraptor attack. That's where the real,
I think we can kind of go there because now they get back. Basically, after spending all night, they manage to make it back to the command center, and Sam Neill says, "I'm going to go do whatever. I'm going to go."
After shocking a kid with 10,000 volts.
That
was pretty good. Although, again, this is a nitpicky thing, and I apologize to get pedantic about this, but why would you make the on state of something red and the bad state green? When she's turning on, flipping all the switches, that
it wasn't green. It was off. It was just there was no light at all.
No, but there's green, and you press the red button, which turns the things red, which means they're on.
Yeah, that's stupid.
And that drives me crazy as a person who has to deal with things like that. That was one of the really stupid things that just bugs a person.
Well, there's all kinds of confusing things about the way this park, as Sam Neill and the two kids are basically, this whole segment is just them trying to make it back to the command center.
For sure.
Part of it is,
and it's pretty good. I mean, it's adventure. Like the cut between the two parts, or she's also having to deal with Velociraptors, the death of Sam Jackson's character, and there's no way that she knows that she may almost kill this child.
Yes.
Is all pretty harrowing, and
which is pretty horrific.
Really well, yeah.
I mean, it's really super horrific, and it's played kind of for comedy. I think because if they didn't, we would just be too alarmed by the whole thing. But
it's a pretty good sequence. Like it's
the suspense of it. Yes,
the cutting back and forth, and where the ramifications of one system affects another system. Still great.
There, but the user interface confusingness. The lights come on when she's kind of half turned on the power, but she has to like turn on the electricity going through the fences and other stuff as she hits all the buttons. There's so many weird user interfaces for this thing. Like the fact that when they cycle the machines back at the command center, but everything doesn't come back on because as Sam Jackson explains it, oh, we cycled the machines, but all the breakers are thrown, so you have to go throw the
So
breaker. You know,
again, I know listeners probably are like, whatever, dude.
right?
But I have computers that do similar things.
Is that
Like,
so?
yeah, so like you reboot a computer, but you have to go in the server room because this one setting didn't allow it to reboot.
Mm.
And that's on the very simple level. So seeing
Okay.
that, I could almost, I mean, I know it's plot stuff, but at a micro level, I've dealt with similar really stupid, like, what do you mean? So when I do this, it doesn't do, oh no, we didn't turn that on, or when we were initially setting up the software,
Yeah.
we could have done that, but that would have taken time. So
No, that makes sense.
I'm willing to give it a pass on that, just because.
I mean, I can
but
go with
the
it.
number of people who have to deal with that is probably pretty slim. But it also works in the plot, so
sure, because now it's like, oh, she has to go throw a breaker, and that's like a quarter mile away apparently.
Well, and then when she runs out because she's running away, it's a very scary scene when she's in there because the Velociraptor is in there, and she finds the torn arm of Samuel L. Jackson, who, by the way, they were gonna do an actual scene of him getting torn up, but then there was a hurricane that hit where they were filming, and so they couldn't go back in Hawaii to film that, so they just had to have the arm. But she's like so freaked out, and she's running out of there, and then she collapses when she gets outside and grabs onto a fence that says high voltage, but nothing happens to her. So I think that was just a mistake. But I was like totally going, what? Shouldn't she get like electrocuted herself right then? But yeah, that's a very scary and stressful scene.
Yeah, and I do have to apologize for my own. Hey, this is tech stuff, so I'm sure there's some listeners who go, "Yeah, way to go, nerd."
No, it's a perfectly good point that you're saying that hey, this plot thing they come up with is actually way better than 1,000 other things they could have come up with.
Yeah,
like the idea that you would need to go into another location. I think it's dumb that they put it a quarter mile away, but I agree with you. It totally makes sense, that in theory you could go, oh, damn it, I got to go down the hall because that's where that's where these servers are.
They do set it up because there's a whole thing with Nedry saying where his automation solutions, they lament on the fact that, hey, maybe that wasn't the right idea.
Yes.
So there's a bunch of planning that they did along the way that sounded good, and they haven't worked the kinks out of it.
Sure.
So there's a lot of movies where I would be like, that's really stupid why you put that. But they actually kind of built that in.
Yeah.
And that's pretty good. They covered their bases.
And likewise, you're totally right. Like, how many times we've seen this in real life where something starts and it's got this major design flaw that nobody really knows until you realize how many times the crew are having to like run into another building to do a thing. So then like a year later, everybody goes, oh, and the cool thing in this version 2 is that we put these two systems right next to one another. And everybody's like, ah, very good. Yeah, well, sometimes you just don't see it until it happens a few times.
Right.
That's cool. So yeah, the kid gets shocked. It just throws him off of the fence. I'm really uncomfortable with this scene because I'm not like uncomfortable like I think it's morally wrong. I don't know if that's remotely possible. I feel like this is on the level of
I think it is.
Indiana Jones.
Plenty of people have been electrocuted and survived.
So I think
it's true. Wait. Of all the things in this movie that you're concerned with the realism of, this is what bothers you.
Because Jason, he's already started to let go, because remember he said, I'm gonna let go on 3, so he counts 1, 2, and then he starts to let go. So it's not like he's gripping it on. It just pushes him off. I don't find it unrealistic. I don't find it unrealistic that they were able to bring him back. He seems pretty messed up afterwards, so I think all that makes sense. By the way, I think that kid is a really good actor. Sorry?
It is a good actor.
I mean, his hands are burned and everything.
Yeah, his hands
Yeah.
are burned, his hair is messed up. He's like limping. But I think he's a really good actor. I think the girl's great. It's a great, they're
They're
good
wonderful.
performances.
Considering that we haven't even gotten to the most dangerous scene for them. Well, let's go there now, because they make it back to after the fence. The fence is their big thing they have to overcome. They make it back to the command center, and Sam Neill says, I don't remember. He says, blah, 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 plot exposition. I have to go do blah, blah, blah. And so he leaves them in the cafeteria, and then no sooner does he leave them alone as they get attacked by velociraptors. And you have this really, maybe the second most memorable scene of the entire film, which is they maneuver into the kitchen, and they have a long scene where they are running and sneaking and using mirrors and doing all of this Steven Spielberg craziness, very similar to a sequence that he did years later in War of the Worlds, where
to avoid the very smart dinosaurs, the very smart
dinosaurs.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. I mean, this is like,
that stuff is great.
Yeah, it's thrilling. It's daring and challenging and exciting. You know, when the dinosaur figures out how to use a doorknob, that's exciting. And well, I mean, actually, sorry,
there's even a line that Laura Dern says where they're like, is the building secure? She's like, yeah, unless they've learned how to open doors.
Yes.
Like, yep, that is the thing.
And people have made the joke actually in the past that in fact, if they had knobs instead of latches, that they probably would have been okay, because these guys would probably have a hard time with a regular.
Yeah, they have handles instead of knobs. Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
But still,
I think my favorite thing about this whole sequence, this entire latter half of the movie, well, I have a lot of things, but like anytime you see the velociraptors from the legs down and they're not showing the upper part of their body, that's just a stunt person and basically velociraptor legs.
Really?
Right.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
What a great low-tech way to do this. That's wonderful. Yeah, that's really fabulous. They're funny, and I like how they snap at one another. When they're showing the whole bodies of the raptors, and they're like moving and kind of there's a lot of like anthropomorphizing going on where they're smiling and.
Well, and I love that Steven Spielberg wanted them to be tall, because he liked the idea of it being tall, and so he had them be taller than they probably were in real life. But then while they were
definitely were in real life.
While they were filming, the paleontologists discovered a species of raptor called the Utah raptor that actually was 10 foot tall. So they were
Is that the one that Drew was talking about when he said?
No, what I was talking about Deinonychus, which is what they actually are in the book, but Crichton used the name Velociraptor because he thought it sounded better. And I mean, who am I to argue? I mean, it's another member. They're all members of the same quote unquote family of dinosaurs. The effect, it's just size. It's what Julia is talking about. It's a matter of scale, and it's fine. I think most people now know, that the velociraptors in this movie aren't really velociraptors, as they were. Utah Raptor is what Julia's talking about, which is now, I believe, a basketball team name too.
That's cool. That's really cool.
But I think, if nothing else, I really love how hard they worked to make them seem like real animals. Like they give them like a real kind of personality. The raptors remind me a lot of the way they kind of remind me of like if you have a lot of puppies in a room. Like it's strange, like the way they kind of fight with each other. You were just talking about it, like. If you ever see like little, like if you have puppies around each other, like they'll kind of fight with each other like that. I have no idea if that was anything that they were looking at, but
or like the heads of King Ghidorah, by the way, later on, when in the most recent Godzilla, where the Ghidorah heads are snapping at one another and
oh, I'm sure this was an influence on that. There's no way.
Yeah, I love that, by the way. That was really cool.
By the
Go ahead.
way, I selfishly in my head also think that now I want to cut that Giallo sequence where the woman is sliding the key and the black gloved hand puts the key back so she keeps
Yes.
it, but with a raptor hand. Like it's the Velociraptor, and it's smart enough to know it can help her unlock it.
That was in Torso, by the way.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Can you imagine that the black gloved hand is replaced with the very smart
With a scaly
Velociraptor.
raptor hand. That's really funny. Puts the key onto the newspaper so that she can pull it.
See, the raptors do know how to unlock the doors. They put the key on the
newspaper so somebody unlocks it for them.
That's awesome.
So that is I remember coming out of this movie and thinking about this kitchen sequence so much, just how wonderful it is.
And it traumatized many kids.
Yeah. I bet it did.
It rightly should.
I guess I actually haven't, I didn't have kids at the time, so I have no idea. Like,
I thought this movie, I mean, I was roughly the age of the kids. I guess I was right at the age of the kids that are in this movie, but I thought this movie was terrifying when I first saw it. Yeah, I saw it like 6 times in the theater. I was obsessed with this movie.
Really?
And yeah, in the moment it came out on VHS, I bought it. Like I read the novel like the summer when we went to summer camp. Like I read the novel while I was at summer camp. Like I was obsessed with this movie. And it just, I don't know. Like, so yeah, it did it traumatize kids, sure, but it also made you obsessed with dinosaurs to, maybe you became a paleontologist, or maybe you're, 41 years old and you're talking about this movie on a podcast because you're promoting a comic book that you're making about dinosaurs.
I mean, I definitely saw stuff that really scared me as a kid that I also watched again and again. I mean, for sure. I mean, Jaws was scary, but definitely I watched it a lot.
But
yeah.
That's Katerina. I didn't do that, but our daughter Katerina was terrified by Five Nights at Freddy's, the video game, and so she became obsessed with it, like creating art about it and reading about it and doing all this. And then she eventually got past. I think that's part of it, is just to try to get past the fear.
By the way, Jamie Lee Curtis, her kid was obsessed with it, and I think she played it with them.
Really?
And she said she would love to do a Five Nights at Freddy's. When I saw the Q&A for Halloween, she said, "I would love to do that." It was great.
Oh, I would.
By the way, how many people do you think? By the way, how many people do you think saw this movie and decided that they should train up and become dinosaur hunters in Costa Rica? Because that's also something nobody's mentioned. Also, because we don't, if they're dinosaurs, they have to keep a secret. So we don't know who the dinosaur hunters are among us.
Yeah.
Think about that.
When I was doing research for my comic, one of the things that I ended up having to dig into for future reference is which modern armaments would be good against dinosaurs, particularly the really big ones. And you end up reading a lot about whaling. It's the only thing with comparable size. So,
interesting.
I think you would think like a Dillon chain gun would probably do it, but
explode. I mean, again, there's no way of knowing for sure, but the thing that a lot of people get into is like grenade launchers and elephant guns and things of that nature. But surely, like, you'd have to be a really good shot to kill one with like a rifle or something, because you're having to just get through a lot of animal to get to anything vital. And I don't know, it's a weird thing to think about, which I ended up having to do. But
sure. Armament, and also yeah, how powerful the vehicle you're in has to be to deal with an animal that big. Yeah.
Here's a research question. How many of the dinosaurs, if say birds are and chickens are, can you cut the head off of a dinosaur and have it walk around for a little while like a chicken can?
Oh man, you got to include that in something.
Because you can still get stomped on, which I've seen that. It's horrifying if you're just out of kindergarten to watch it.
Oh man,
sure.
You can run around for like a couple of minutes.
I really wish I would have thought of that. And there's still time. There's still time.
Yeah.
I mean, I wonder if their physiology, if that's
I believe it,
the way that chickens are, or if they're somewhere along that raptor or a T-Rex would work
sounds like
similarly.
a
I have
great
no
idea.
idea.
I think there's a lot of room to just make shit up if you want. So yes,
Sure.
if you cut off the head of a T-Rex, it would probably
I
run
keep
around
predicting.
like crazy and slash at things.
Well, I mean,
Oh,
that
no.
is that was the argument that some people had made, is that if you managed to kill a dinosaur and it was coming at you because of its sheer weight, it would still keep coming at you
Yeah,
before
physics
it.
and all.
Yeah.
At the very least, it would fall toward you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we should wrap up though, because we've
Sure,
gone
sure.
pretty
Yes.
long at this point.
So
Well,
all right, yeah.
the they get saved by the T-Rex. That's nuts. Like,
Oh, that is
speaking of
awesome.
T-Rex, yeah, that's like probably the most iconic shot in the whole movie, is with the dinosaur skeleton collapsing or behind it.
Well,
with
and the banner that says "When
Yeah.
dinosaurs ruled the earth."
Yeah, well,
has
and
the-
it wasn't originally the plan. Like the plan was not for the T-Rex, the live T-Rex, to be the saver. In fact, the original plan was that the Velociraptors would be to meet their demise from the bones, from the getting
Really?
impaled by a rib, One of them gets impaled by a rib, and the other one gets crushed by the head of the skeleton.
Uh-huh.
But instead, Spielberg said he really wanted T-Rex to come back and
And then
be
they
the
just
star.
run for it, and that's the end
Yeah.
of the movie. That's really the end. I mean, because of that, they get in the jeeps and they fly away.
Well, it ends very much like a 1950s monster movie in that respect. Is like, monsters are dead, movie's over.
Movie's
I mean, there's
over.
some there's like there's contemplative,
Sure.
them kind of contemplative thought, them in the helicopter, going, oh, what have we all gone through? But I mean,
Yes.
I don't think, other than the one stinger about him not endorsing the park, like, again, after you have that shot of the T-Rex roaring, like, having much more character interaction would just be a waste. Like,
Yeah.
I don't even know that you want to talk about stuff that you cut. I don't even know that you needed that dialogue's funny. I don't know that you needed it.
Especially since he doesn't actually end up not, he ends up coming back to it anyway. So it's not like it meant anything.
Yep. Actually, I don't remember if Hammond does or not, because I haven't seen the second movie. But
Hammond actually is semi-reformed in the second. Really, you've never seen The Lost World?
Oh, I saw it, but it's been like 30 years. So,
Okay.
so yeah, I just
Not
don't
30.
remember.
It wouldn't be 30. But yeah,
Well,
it's been a while.
Hammond's kind of semi-reformed in the second one, but he's still Hammond.
You're right. It is 23 years since it came
So
out.
Hammond does not have anything to do with the new.
It's
Park?
his nephew.
Oh, okay.
And I mean, Matt, I don't want to turn this into the mini podcast
Right.
for The Lost World, but yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it's I don't know. That's anyway.
Okay.
So let's get our final thoughts, and then we'll come around for endorsements. But what was the order that we went in? I think it was
Started with me.
Julia, then Tony. So Julia, I know that we've gone deep on Jurassic Park. So what are your final thoughts?
Especially
on
you, Jason.
Yes.
Oh my God.
All right.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, Julia. Final
Sorry,
thoughts.
my eyes are still rolled into the back of my head.
Jurassic.
I gotta.
That's fine.
This is so funny because you're the one who
deserved.
made.
I know.
That's
It was
deserved.
Tony's turn.
I blame you. So
Uh,
okay.
What have we become?
Right.
Anyway, I think it's funny that we managed to get through the movie and didn't talk about the fact that the first person who dies is the lawyer who gets eaten while sitting on a porta potty.
Yeah.
I mean, that scene is that's, speaking of iconic scenes, it's such an iconic scene when he's like running away, leaving the poor children alone in the car.
Yeah.
And then he's hiding in the porta potty and then he gets chomped. Anyway, that's
By the way,
pretty funny.
that guy, Martin Ferrero, was a regular on Miami Vice, and he was great.
Lawyers, am I right? Oh wait, Julia.
Yeah.
Oh, oops.
Anyway, so yes, R.I.P. to my colleague there. So yes, I think that we've talked about a lot of pieces, but there's still so much that we could say because this film is just full of wonderful tidbits and great performances and amazing effects and beautiful sets. So I think it's been a really good conversation, and I'm trying to think if there's anything. I mean, the score, we talked about the score. I don't think there's anything that we didn't at least touch on, although, like I say, there's a lot more that we could say about it. But I think it's really interesting. It's very thought provoking to think about, which the whole point of Michael Crichton's book is that, the idea that how much should we, like Tony was saying, how much should we do with science or CG? I think it's a really good point, because I think at that point when they made this is when, like, Dolly, the sheep, was being cloned and all those things, and you just can't help but wonder. And now, of course, with all of the we have so much with AI that we've seen that in a million films as well. We could maybe do a retrospective about robots at some point, because I think there's some really good. We've done some, obviously, we've done like Terminator, but just the idea that we are creating our own demise, basically.
Sure.
So yeah, there's a lot.
Tony, what are your final thoughts?
I mean, this is a really good movie and set the precedent for many, many, many things to come. It took B-movie sensibilities and took them to the next level, which, again, I think, now that I think about it, is something that Spielberg's pretty good at. What Raiders of the Lost Ark did for serials, for example. And having worked on Jaws, probably definitely gave an insight on how to do some of this stuff perhaps better. It still holds up really well. And I think a lot of it's weird because a lot of the things that it brings up, we're still just as bad about doing all these things. This movie is great. There's a really good reason why it's a classic.
Yeah.
Great acting, cool. All the stars in it who are great. The kids are great. What it brings up is cool. All the mixture of CG, again, it was groundbreaking, but unlike some other movies that had, wow, that's cool now, a lot of that doesn't quite hold up as well. You can look at it and go, oh, that was the best we could do at the time. Most of this still looks amazing. Even at the compositing level, which is really hard to do. And it's a real special skill when you can make everything lay into the scene that well. Kudos to, everybody involved was really bringing their A game on this. So
it works so well that I don't even notice it half the time, if that makes any sense.
I wouldn't have expected, I expected to see more of the seams, just having not watched it in a while, but it's great. And again, it's everybody from cast, crew, direction, all of it as a whole brings a really, really fun movie. Often imitated, never duplicated.
Drew, bring this home for us. However you want to wrap this up, both the discussion of Jurassic Park, but also the whole dinosaur series.
Well, I just kind of want to take a moment and appreciate the fact that I got all of you to agree to not only do all of these movies, but this mini movies on this subject, and really go. I really appreciate that you let me go like very heavy into something that's kind of a personal obsession of mine, and not necessarily something that might not always be enjoyed by the rest of the group. And so I think I mean, it seems like y'all enjoyed yourself.
Oh, we had a good time.
Movies.
Yeah.
But I the concern is always there, because this is definitely a singular obsession of mine. And I kind of felt this way back when we were doing the Bela Lugosi retrospective too. Sometimes there are things that I'm really into, and I don't always know if everybody else is going to get as excited about it. So I just
like a retrospective full of classics. I don't know how singular you are. Not to take away from your experience, but I think we did do a Godzilla retrospective.
Yeah.
I think Dinosaurs aren't very far from that. I'm glad we did it, but I think you can breathe a little easier, I think, in the future, because usually, as we know, people are out there for good, fun stuff. So.
Well, I also feel like I curated. I chose my movies well, and I don't know. I'm happy that it went over well. I'm happy everybody went on this journey with me and they had a good time. And look, Jurassic Park. This is one of the best science fiction movies of the 90s. Probably one of the best science fiction movies ever made. You can make a strong argument that it's one of the better horror type movies in this genre. And it's just so well done. I mean, you're right. We could talk about this movie probably another hour because there's just so
Mhm.
much to it. And it's smart, it's fun, it's scary, it's thrilling. There's a reason why no one, you look at like Dinosaurs as a science fiction genre or as a monster movie genre, and the Jurassic franchise has basically owned that since this
Yeah.
movie came out, because other than the King Kong reboot, the different King Kong reboots that we've now had, and some B movie type stuff, no one has really attempted a large scale dinosaur movie quite like this, except for maybe the Land of the Lost movie, which was done as a farce. So, the shadow of Jurassic Park really looms large. And I think it was great to end with this movie because you got to see all the stuff that led up to this, kind of like what Tony was talking about, how Spielberg took like what was a B movie genre and then really made it well. And I loved talking about this. I love talking about it with y'all. I hope listeners get something out of it. And, again, just such a good time talking about this movie tonight.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much. And I agree. I keep thinking about the fact that like there's so many angles. If I'm looking at a grid or like a dartboard or something, there's so many ways that we could spend yet another hour. Like we barely touched on the fact that Laura Dern is here and Sam Neill and these Jeff Goldblum. We touched on them a little bit, but you could go so deep in all these conversations. So this is an embarrassment of riches. But and it was really seeing it culminate the way that you curated this list, so that we went from through the initial the 1950s dinosaur film, then we went into the forgot movies, and then here, and it's just an amazing evolution. So I'm excited that we did. So, all right. Shockingly, that brings us to the end. I know we owe it more, but we've been at it for a while. So let's get our endorsements. I really want to know what you guys are wanting to recommend to me. I had been so freaking busy trying to hit a book deadline, and then things have kind of eased up, and I've got a little more time to do some reading. So I'd love to hear, and watching, I'd love to hear what you guys would recommend to me. So same direction. Julia, I know that you were waiting for the question to come, but I don't know if you have an answer. Do you have anything that you want to endorse for us?
We have been, Jason and I are part of a book club these days, and we are currently reading a book called The Hummingbird, which I'm not finished with it yet. But I think it's really good and really interesting. It's kind of about hospice worker and her interaction with her patient, who is he's written about Pearl Harbor and history of war, basically. And then her husband is a vet who's dealing with some serious PTSD from Afghanistan. It's just a really interesting book. It's by, I'm trying to see if I can bring up the book because I'm forgetting the last name of the Stephen Kiernan. But anyway, that's really good. And then I've endorsed it many times before, but I'm a fan of the current Doctor and Doctor Who. I like her. I think she's really great, and I think that I'm enjoying the season. I know there's mixed reviews about the season, but today was the season finale, or as they call it in England, the series finale, even though it's not the end of the whole show. It was really good. I was really into it because it really just kind of revealed some huge things about the Doctor that we never knew before, and it's just really interesting. So, if you've been a fan in the past and then you kind of dropped off, take it, watch the last few episodes of the season. I think it's really fun. So that's what I've got.
That's wonderful. Tony, what do you have for us?
So I'm gonna go, even though I haven't watched all of them, I'm gonna go for the new Mill Creek releases of Ultraman. So they've done Ultra Q, Ultraman, Ultra 7, and Return of Ultraman so far. And I think they're going to do more. Each one also has a digital thing for Movie Spree, so you can watch it streaming if you don't want to break out your Blu-rays. That's inconvenient. But these steel books they've done come with awesome booklets. They look great on the shelf, and it's the first time we've gotten really nice high-res prints of Ultraman series. So I hope they keep going through. Not even in this series, they've done some of the later ones as well, like Ultraman Orb, etc. And then also for my birthday, on that same note, I got a series called Red Baron, which I didn't know much about. I'd seen, clips from it, but that one's also super fun. And again, an evil galactic dictator wants to, mess up the Earth and take over by capturing all these robots and using them against humanity. Well, I guess it's like the supervillain has decided it's time for me to take all these robots, and the guy pilots Red Baron against it. So if you want to watch robotic action, or lots of robots and monsters in suits duking it out, we live in a golden age currently.
Yeah.
But these box sets for these steel books and regular sets for the Ultraman series are really a cut above. So if that's your bag, now is the time to check it out.
True.
Well, I mean, I think I have to go back to the whole reason why we've been doing this retrospective. We're in the last. By the time most of you are going to be listening to this, it's going to be the last 13 days of my Indiegogo campaign for Halloween Man, the Valentine's Day that time forgot, which is our big dinosaur storyline that we are crowdfunding. We are a mere $300 away from our goal. But the trick of this is everything I've ever read about crowdfunding, and this definitely was true of the last time I crowdfunded. Most crowdfunds fizzle out in the last few weeks because if you don't reach your goal, that's going to be why. And it's because it's hard to keep building that excitement, and I understand that. But hear my plea one more time. If you've enjoyed this retrospective, and if indeed you enjoy the podcast and enjoy hearing me on the podcast, you've enjoyed my comics sometime over the years, please take a moment. The links are all up and down our Facebook group. You can go to halloweenman.com and get to it there. Please check it out. You can back for as low as $1, and everything counts. And if a lot of you pitch in a little, we will get there, maybe before even the time the time frame is over, because that would be great. But we've just gotten into working on chapter 2, and the artwork in this is incredible. The level of research we've all put in on dinosaurs has led to some really great creature designs that I think people will be thrilled to see. And again, I'm really happy that I've been able to bring this story to life. So please consider becoming a backer. We've got some really cool perks. I also want to give a shout out to the Monster Movie Happy Hour podcast, because as of this recording, they have just become our latest backers. And they did so because they've listened to me yammer on about monster movies on this podcast, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate the solidarity. So thank you for that. So be like those cool people, and maybe consider becoming a backer, and maybe I'll give you a shout out on the podcast, and I'll definitely give you a shout out in the comic book. But yeah, this is the last few days, last week or so. Please, seriously, if you've ever even remotely been curious about my comic, consider becoming a backer.
Fascinating. All right.
They are
Thank you
awesome,
very
by
much.
the way. That podcast is great.
My endorsement for the week, 2 things. One, I watched Dead End Drive-In at the C Film Center in Denver with Brian Trenchard Smith, who the director, in attendance, and he answered questions about it. And if you haven't seen Dead End Drive-In, it came out in 1986, and it supposes a world where this kid takes his girlfriend to the drive-in, and he says, "Oh, I'm unemployed, so I get the cheaper ticket." And then once he's in, it's actually a trick. Whereas if he had paid the full price, they'd let him go. But if you're unemployed, they trap you in this place and you can never leave. It's just a giant prison basically, but it's such a neat prison with its own community and drugs and movies and stuff that nobody really wants to leave. And so it's a fascinating allegory of this kid who just wants to get out of this cage, even though his girlfriend, for instance, decides that she likes it. An amazing movie, 1986, but to be honest with you, it plays very well today, and it's really scary today. The other thing that I wanted to endorse is I know that I've talked about this about a year ago, but I was rereading Mike McPadden's Teen Movie Hell, which is just an A to Z discussion of 1970s to early 1990s teen films, coming of age comedies, teen sex movies, just all the teen movies, everything from Pretty in Pink to The Last American Virgin and everything in between, and about how that was a genre that was really happening and then kind of went away and hasn't really been replaced, that there's a lot of reasons for that, and this movie is exactly about that. It's just fascinating, and I really enjoyed it. I interviewed McPadden about a year ago, but Teen Movie Hell, if you haven't read it and you're a fan of movie history, definitely should check it out. So,
Man,
and that's it.
Your endorsement of Dead End Drive-In makes me miss the good old random days of Netflix, because I think that's where I saw it back when random stuff would show up. Now most of that's on Prime, so we still can get that. But
that's right.
I do miss the look. We're new to the streaming thing. Here's a bunch of stuff we purchased. Have at it. That's all of that's now on Prime. So
it's fascinating, isn't it? I mean, and they sold that movie in the United States as being like Mad Max, and it's definitely
it's a way different. It's closer to Highway to Hell in feel than it is Mad Max.
Right.
Like you could do a great double feature of Highway to Hell.
There's definitely car culture. There's definitely a lot of like punk and new wave stuff that's intended to be like intimidating to the audience. Whereas it's really, just a bunch of teenagers with spiky hair, really,
Right.
but it's I don't know. It was pretty amazing, and it had a lot to say about the opium of the masses and so forth. So I was impressed. All right. Well, gosh, guys, thank you. I know we went really long, but it was a very enjoyable conversation. Drew, thanks for curating. Everybody, thank you for being on, and I can't wait to be back. I don't know exactly what it is. We'll be discussing internally, probably whatever we choose next. I don't know if we'll go into the next retrospective or have a couple one-offs, so we'll just figure it out. But we'll be back real soon. And thank you, everybody. Be excellent to one another. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Good night.
Night.
Good night.